Humanae Vitae is probably the most countercultural document that's ever been written.
Everyone laughed at him. They said, look at this Pope, get with the times.
Humanae Vitae, as an expression of church teaching goes, is the most derided, mocked, ignored, unread thing that ever existed.
What does it take to be a hero? To stand up for truth and justice in a culture that seems so set against it? A cape? Big muscles? Superhuman powers? As it turns out, no. At least not for a Humanae Vitae hero. When we asked for folks to tell us about the people who had most inspired them in living out the beauty of the Pope's teaching, we received a wide variety of nominations. Men and women from every age group and walk of life. But even in all the diversity, certain similarities shone through, especially in the area of character qualities. And the virtues that these heroes have in common present an inspiring picture of what it truly takes to be a hero. High on the list was a desire for truth and a willingness to follow the evidence wherever it leads. Several people nominated Professor Janet Smith as a Humanae Vitae hero. Interestingly, she started on her journey toward that status after she was asked to support a pro-abortion movement at her college.
I went to this meeting, and I have to admit, I was doing my best, just as everybody else on campus was doing, to look like John Lennon. And I actually looked very much like John Lennon. I had it all together. And I sat at this meeting, and again, the most sublime innocence in the world. I raised my hand and I said, I'm willing to write letters to support abortion, but I just need to know when you think human life begins. Absolutely honest question. And they just started booing and shouting and saying, we don't need your kind here. We don't need you right-to-lifers here. And I'm sitting there saying, my kind, I look like John Lennon, just like everybody else in the room does. So what distinguishes me from the rest of them? Well, I really felt like I got, hit over the head with a rock at that point, and just started thinking deeply about things like why people were indifferent to the question about when human life began.
Professor Smith's pro-life work led her to see the connection between abortion and contraception, and she is now one of the world's leading experts on Humanae Vitae, and one of its most effective evangelists. A couple whose work has drawn thousands of people towards accepting not only the Church's teaching on contraception, but the Catholic faith itself, are Scott and Kimberly Hahn. Like Janet Smith, Kimberly started out doing pro-life presentations, and, like Janet, she originally thought that contraception was a completely different issue. But she found herself in an ethics class at graduate school, with an assignment to study the morality of contraception.
One man spoke up and he said, I know we're not Catholic here, so probably some form of contraception's fine. And he said, hopefully we're pro-life, so I think just the barrier method. It was like he was announcing the results of our study before any of us had studied it. And I said to him, why do you make the comment about Catholics? He said, well, Catholics are opposed to contraception. That was news to me. It may have been news to everybody there, but it definitely was news to me. I said, well, why do they oppose it? He said there are only two reasons. He said, first of all, the Pope isn't married, so he doesn't live with the consequences. And secondly, Catholics are just out to make all the Catholics they can in the world. And it was such a simplistic answer, obviously putting down a large group of people without taking them seriously. And I said, I'd like to know why they think what they think. And he said, well, if you want to find out, that's fine. I couldn't care less.
Kimberly's study led her to accept Humanae Vitae, and one of the major turning points on that journey involved the Hahns reading a book by another of our Humanae Vitae heroes, John Kipley. John and his wife Sheila also loved the truth and stood firm for it in an age when it seemed like very few were.
In one of my moral theology classes, a young student came up after class and told me, Mr. Kipley, you are the first person I've ever heard say a good word about Humanae Vitae.
The Kipleys' published works have impacted people all over the world, thanks in large part to people like Father Joseph Fessio, the founder of Ignatius Press. He was nominated as an HV hero by Father Joseph Ilo of San Francisco.
I started working for him in San Francisco and I graduated as an English major and started working at Ignatius Press in 1983 as a copy editor. And about 6 months into that job, I picked up a little copy of Humanae Vitae, which Father Fessio had reprinted. He had started the press in 1978, and one of the first publications was a new translation of Humanae Vitae. So I read that and it changed my life. I was dating a girl at the time. We were planning on getting married, and I had a vision of marriage and my own humanity and the human person that was so much deepened, and that there was such great joy in me. Kind of like John Paul II, I fell in love with human love. So the encyclical really, in those days, was widely disregarded, but my hero, Father Joseph Fessio, provided that in the new translation, promoted it, actually did a conference on it in San Francisco, and had it been not for him, I wouldn't have read the document. And it really, I would say I'm a priest because of Humanae Vitae, largely because of the promotion of that encyclical by Father Joseph Fessio, my Humanae Vitae hero.
Father Fessio is a great example of someone who has another common characteristic of Humanae Vitae heroes. Not only do they love the truth, but they are willing to step out in faith and do something about it. And often, that something has never been done before. HV heroes are pioneers and trailblazers. One pioneering woman very close to our heart is Terry Mays. While serving as Family Life Director of the Diocese of San Jose, Terry pursued a dream of building a statewide coalition of NFP users and advocates, so that they could provide each other support and unite their efforts throughout the state. The California Association of Natural Family Planning was born. That work has been most recently directed with great love and dedication by Sheila St. John.
My Humanae Vitae hero is Sheila St. John. She's been teaching women and couples about the good news of natural family planning for years, and her amazing accomplishment to me is in this work with California NFP. We really need to unite all the people who have responded to Humanae Vitae, all the folks who are out there in the trenches, and they've done that here in California, and that's a beautiful thing, and I'd like to see that replicated throughout the country. We need to work together. And then just working with her over the last 2 years, getting this conference, Celebrate Humanae Vitae, 50th anniversary together. She has persevered, and certainly there were times when we didn't think this was going to come together, but being here today and this weekend has been amazing, and it really is thanks to Sheila St. John, and I am forever grateful for her hard work and her passion for this work.
Joan Nolan is another woman who has worked tirelessly to help meet the needs of women and families trying to live out the teachings of Humanae Vitae. She is the co-founder and executive director of the John Paul II Center for Women, as well as the co-founder of the National Gianna Center for Women's Health and Fertility, a national network of women's medical clinics dedicated to providing reproductive health care in line with Catholic teaching. Evelyn Eaton is an inspiration to many. She was the first woman to teach at a Catholic seminary, in China of all places, and she became an integral part of the NFP movement in California when she was assigned to help the Archdiocese of San Francisco around the time that Humanae Vitae was published. Along with teaching, this generous and loving woman anonymously funded many students training in NFP. Dr. Howard Herning was another major NFP pioneer in California and a mentor to many in the field. He served on the advisory board of the CANFP from the very beginning, and is remembered fondly by the families he impacted through his medical practice. Christine Maruza spoke for many when she wrote at his death in 2016 that Dr. Herning was the finest physician who ever cared for me. Speaking of physicians having an impact, Dr. Herning himself was trained by a couple who have helped millions of people around the world and inspired many of the Humanae Vitae heroes we celebrate today, Drs. John and Evelyn Billings.
Dr. John Billings was asked by his pastor, Father Maurice Katerinich, if he would come up with something better than the rhythm method. And he said, well, I'm a neurologist, can't you find an OBGYN or somebody more in that field? And Father Maurice Katerinich, who came from a long line of medical doctors, said, no, you'll be more objective. So Dr. John said, okay, I'll give it 3 months.
That 3 months turned into the rest of his life and led to worldwide influence, including unprecedented access to China.
They had over 45,000 teachers in China at one time and millions of couples using it. It was just amazing. And I remember the theologian, Father Ronald Lawler, before he died, called me and said, we must get the word out that this is a whole country being led to Christianity because of the Billings method.
Another trailblazing doctor who is having a worldwide influence is Thomas Hildress. He was nominated by several different people.
when they came out with the decision of Humanae Vitae, the first thing that I wanted to do was to get a copy of it so I could read it. So I went to the Newman Club chaplain at the University of Minnesota and asked him, where do I get a copy of Humanae Vitae? And he looked at me and he says, what do you want to read that kind of trash for? And of course that made me want to read it even more. So as I look back on it, it gets me a little bit emotional because I got a hold of it, finally got a hold of it, I should say. It's not easy to get a hold of an encyclical if you don't know where to find it. But I found one, and I was an instant convert to it.
Dr. Hildress took to heart the Pope's call for scientists and healthcare professionals to become involved, and he dove into research. Together with Ann Preble, Diane Daly, and his wife Sue, they developed the Creighton Fertility Care System. He also took Pope Paul VI's call one step further and started an institute that bears his name. That decision was made on the way home from Mass on the day the Pope died.
The priest gave this very moving eulogy, something I had never heard from a priest in all of those years of the discussion leading up to Humanae Vitae. They've been pretty quiet, but he was really, really moved. So, on the way home, we just got to a stop and go light and said we should build this. So we did it.
Today, the Pope Paul VI Institute is on the cutting edge of fertility care. And that life-changing work involves much more than just helping couples with child spacing.
A lot of our work now is in infertility, and we got thousands of babies all over the world that have been born as a result of nanotechnology, and it's pretty cool.
I've got 3 children, so I'm so happy I trusted him. I owe so much to everything he's done.
Through Creighton Model, with the illumination of nanotechnology, then I actually ended up being able to bring my 4th child into the world, because otherwise that would not have been possible.
Dr. Hildress has also opened up new doors for medical practitioners around the world.
Dr. Thomas Hildress is my Humanae Vitae hero. I was looking for a place to work that would support my morals and my values, and ended up as an RN at Pope Paul VI Institute and teaching Creighton Model. And he's given the opportunity to medical professionals all over the world to be able to work and support their beliefs and their morals. And it's been life-changing for many, many people. So I thank him for all his work.
He's had to have had a lot of faith in God along this route, right? To withstand everything they've had to withstand and to stand up and go the route that he's gone. You gotta have an incredible faith to do that.
Faith is exactly what all of our Humanae Vitae heroes have. These courageous men and women didn't wait around to see who else might act. They saw a need and did something about it. Like Father Paul Marks, who worked for decades to protect human dignity in the family, especially unborn babies. He launched the Human Life Institute in 1972, which became Human Life International in 1981. Pope John Paul II called Father Marks the Apostle of Life, and told him that he was doing the most important work on earth. Father Marks wasn't the only HV hero on our list to have an audience with the Pope, but you certainly don't have to have founded a worldwide ministry or be recognized by the Holy Father to be one. Ginni Berg was nominated by her son Gary, who shared how his mom calmly reasoned with him over Thanksgiving turkey when he would come home from college armed with the latest arguments dissenting from Humanae Vitae. As importantly, he wrote, she walked the walk, gracing my life with 5 incredible brothers and then helping found and run the first pro-life pregnancy counseling center in their area. Ginni Berg exemplifies not only that pioneering, trailblazing spirit of so many other HV heroes, but also the character trait that is by far the most prominent among them, a love for people. Like Steve Mosier. Steve is a world-renowned advocate for human rights, whose fight against coercive population control programs has helped hundreds of thousands of women and families around the world. Helping women and families is also Dr. Amy Holmes' specialty. As so many of her patients explain, finding a doctor that not only sticks with the church's teaching instead of the cultural norms, but cares so much for them, is a godsend. A similar story is told about Dr. Henry Ng, who was also nominated by one of his patients. Teresa Rauch explains that Dr. Ng not only changed the lives of those who came to see him, but also the very culture of the hospitals where he served. His presentation to Kaiser helped make that entire institution more open to NFP. Dr. Suzanne Regal was another culture changer. She stood strong in the face of Roe v. Wade and became a champion of natural family planning and a shining light in her medical community. Jane Mitchell Werbich is another strong voice for life. After working at Planned Parenthood for a time, she became a whistleblower against that organization, and now helps women using the Creighton model. Beyond the medical community, we also find many Humanae Vitae heroes show their love for others through teaching and counseling.
Our HV hero is Bishop Khandala of the Diocese of Tulsa. We knew him as Father David when we were at Texas A&M University 19 years ago.
And we were a young married couple in College Station, and we had just had our first daughter. It was a very difficult pregnancy, and although originally we were gung-ho about the church's teaching, after that pregnancy we were terrified and scared of the future. And we went frequently to meet with Father David, desperately trying to find a loophole into the church's teaching on family planning. We thought we had all the best reasons to contracept, and with compassion and great conviction, he shot down every one of our ideas, which then gave us the great courage to move forward and with trust and faith with the church's teaching on family planning.
From parishes to high schools to home meetings, these godly men and women faithfully pour into the lives of their students. Like Father Mark Caligari, who taught at Brophy High School in Phoenix for 24 years. He translated Humanae Vitae from the Italian and amassed a tremendous library in French, English, Italian, and Latin on the different methods of NFP. He spent countless hours visiting his friends throughout the United States and Europe, spreading the good news of natural family planning. Father Larry Toski is another legend in this field. Juanita and Javier Rivera credit Father Larry with saving their marriage and restoring their broken souls, and are among many who have been profoundly impacted by Father Larry's seminars and programs. His powerful ministry in Bakersfield is having a tremendous impact. Dennis Jacobelli has changed lives at Vincent Memorial Catholic High School in Calexico for close to 40 years. Mr. Jake, as he is known, has now formed several generations in the beauty of NFP, theology of the body, and the rest of the Church's teaching on love. Ann and Bob Nurbon were doing marriage prep courses when they realized that they needed to reach young men and women even before they were at that stage. They established Family Honor, a chastity curriculum for parents and youth that recently celebrated 30 years of impacting lives around the world. NFP coordinator Stella Kitchen was nominated by Dr. Karen Pohelos, who credits Stella with being the reason she changed her life and medical practice to line up with the Church's teaching. Of course, those parish NFP coordinators like Stella need support, and they get it from godly leaders like Archbishop Salvatore Cordialone, who has ensured his priests, deacons, and seminarians have all had additional, focused training in NFP. And Cardinal Raymond Leo Berg, who has been an unwavering champion of Humanae Vitae throughout his ministry. Even as a new bishop, at a time when many dioceses were dismantling their marriage and family programs, he not only established natural family planning programs, but made sure they remained strong through spiritual and financial support. Father Daniel Mccaffrey travels the country, preaching parish missions through his NFP outreach program. He also trains other priests, so they can more confidently and courageously preach this message too. And Bishop Mark Seitz, who is working tirelessly to promote the teachings of Humanae Vitae and theology of the body in his diocese in Texas. The list goes on and on. Indeed, it is far too long to fit into one video. But to those of you we mentioned, and to all of you that we missed, thank you. Thank you for loving truth and loving others. And thank you for your willingness to step out in faith and change the world. You are an inspiration to us all.